Now let's begin. The rain hammered against Joel Bowman's windshield as he navigated the evening traffic, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The digital clock on his dashboard read 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes until his shift started at the distribution center. He'd already worked a full day at the construction site, his muscles aching from hauling materials in the cold, and now he faced another 8 hours of loading trucks. His daughter Emma's voice crackled through his phone speaker, tinny and small. "Daddy, when are you coming home?" "Late tonight, sweetheart. Mrs. Chin will put you to bed, okay? I miss you." Joel's chest tightened. "I miss you too, baby. But we talked about this. Just a few more months and—" He spotted the figure ahead through the sheets of rain. An elderly man stood beside a sedan with its hazard lights blinking, hunched over a flat tire. Most drivers were speeding past, their headlights cutting through the downpour without slowing. Joel's foot moved toward the accelerator. He couldn't afford to be late. His supervisor, Gary Huffman, had already written him up twice this month. But something made him glance in his rearview mirror at the photo dangling from it. Emma, gap-toothed and grinning, holding the world's best dad card she'd made him. Never regret kindness, he'd told her 100 times. It was what his own father had taught him before the factory accident took him. Joel pulled over. "Emma, I have to go? Be good for Mrs. Chun." The old man looked up as Joel approached, rain soaking through his jacket within seconds. He had kind eyes, weathered skin, and hands that trembled slightly as he gripped a tire iron. "Let me help you with that, sir," Joel said. "Oh, I couldn't ask you to," Glenn Hooper started, but Joel was already kneeling beside the tire. "No asking needed. You'll catch pneumonia out here." They worked in relative silence, Joel's practiced hands making quick work of the tire change despite the weather. Glenn watched him with an intensity that Joel found curious but didn't question. When the spare was secured, Joel helped the old man to his feet. "You're going to be late for something," Glenn observed, noting Joel's work uniform and the anxiety in his movements. "I'll manage," Joel said, though his phone now read 7:03. Glenn pulled out his wallet, but Joel raised a hand. "No need, sir. Just pay it forward." "What's your name, son?" "Joel Bowman." Glenn gripped his hand firmly, searchingly. "Glenn Hooper. And I won't forget this, Joel Bowman." Joel arrived at the distribution center at 7:18. Gary Huffman was waiting at the entrance, arms crossed over his considerable gut, his face twisted in satisfaction. "Third strike, Bowman. Clean out your locker." "Mr. Huffman, please." There was an old man. "Save it. I got 30 guys who'd kill for your spot and actually show up on time." Gary leaned closer, his breath reeking of coffee and cigarettes. "You're done, and good luck finding another job with this on your record." Joel felt the world tilt. This job, terrible as it was, paid for Emma's asthma medication, for the apartment that kept them off the streets after the medical bills from his wife's cancer had destroyed them, for the food that kept his daughter healthy. "I have a daughter," Joel said quietly. "I just need." Should have thought of that before playing Good Samaritan. Gary's smile was cruel. "Security will escort you out." Emma was crying when Joel got home at 8:30, Mrs. Chun looking apologetic at the door. "She wouldn't settle down," the elderly neighbor explained. "Kept asking for you." Joel paid her what he could spare and found his daughter curled up on the couch, her small chest heaving with sobs. The moment she saw him, she launched herself into his arms. "It's my fault, Daddy," she wailed into his shoulder. "If I didn't need the medicine, if I wasn't sick, you wouldn't have to work so much, and you wouldn't have stopped to help that man, and—" "Emma." Joel pulled back to look at her 7-year-old face, so much like her mother's. "Listen to me. Helping people is never wrong. Never. Even when it costs us something. But now you don't have a job. I'll find another one." He forced certainty into his voice he didn't feel. "We're Bowmans. We don't quit, remember?" She nodded against his chest, her breathing finally steadying. Joel held her until she fell asleep, then carried her to the bedroom they shared. He took the couch, giving her the only bed. He stared at the water-stained ceiling, doing math that didn't add up no matter how he calculated it. 2 weeks until rent. Emma's medication refill in 5 days. The electric bill already overdue. He had $247 in checking and another $89 in an envelope under the floorboard. Joel had survived worse. After Sarah died 3 years ago, leaving him with a mountain of medical debt and a 5-year-old daughter, he'd learned to stretch dollars and find work wherever he could. Construction paid under the table sometimes, which helped. He'd find something. He had to. The next morning, Joel was filling out applications at a diner when his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Mr. Bowman? The voice was professional, female. This is Naomi Post from Hooper and Associates. I'm calling about Glenn Hooper. Joel's stomach dropped. Is he okay? A pause. I'm afraid Mr. Hooper passed away last night. A heart condition he'd been managing for some time. But before he died, he made some arrangements. He spoke very highly of you. I only met him once, Joel said, confused. Sometimes once is enough. Mr. Hooper was an excellent judge of character. Could you come to my office tomorrow at 10? There's something he wanted you to have. Joel spent the next day in a fog of job applications and growing dread about the meeting. Whatever Glenn had left him, if anything, it couldn't be much. The old man had been driving a 15-year-old sedan. Naomi Post's office was in a modest building downtown. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an appraising manner. Mr. Hooper was a retired district court judge, she explained, sliding papers across her desk. He spent his final years quietly, but he never stopped paying attention to his community. He left you something unusual. She opened a safe and withdrew a thick envelope and a small key. Inside this envelope is documentation, evidence Mr. Hooper compiled over the past 12 years regarding systematic corruption in our city. Bribery, extortion, evidence tampering. It implicates some very powerful people. Joel's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Names jumped out at him. Stuart Daniel, owner of Daniel Property Development. Corey Daniel, city councilman. Whitney, or county prosecutor. Sidney Cohen, police captain. Pages and pages of bank records, recorded conversations, photographs. Why me? Joel whispered. Because the people he tried to give this to before, other judges, federal investigators, either ended up threatened into silence or bought off. Mr. Hooper needed someone with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Someone whose character he could verify in a moment of pressure. Naomi's expression softened. He did background on you after your encounter. Single father, drowning in medical debt, working yourself to death for your daughter. Honest to a fault. He said you were the only person he met in 12 years who helped him without expecting anything in return. What am I supposed to do with this? That's up to you. But there's more. She handed him the key. This opens a storage unit containing additional evidence. Physical documents Mr. Hooper kept separate. And if you choose to pursue this, if you manage to bring these people to justice, Mr. Hooper established a trust. $500,000. Enough to clear your debts, give your daughter a future, start over. Joel's vision blurred. $500,000. It was impossible, but so was the stack of evidence in his hands. These people, he said slowly, thinking of Stuart Daniel's face smiling from campaign billboards around the city. They'll come after me. Almost certainly, Naomi agreed. Which is why Mr. Hooper also left instructions, contacts, and contingencies. He spent years planning this. But I won't lie to you, Mr. Bowman. This is dangerous. Joel thought of Emma, of the medicine running low, of the eviction notice that would come if he didn't find work soon. Then he thought of Sarah, who'd spent her last months in agony because their insurance had denied her treatment. Denied it because someone in an office decided profit mattered more than her life. These were the people who built a world where helping someone change a tire could cost you everything. Tell me what I need to do, Joel said. Joel spent 3 days studying Glenn's evidence before he understood the scope of what he was facing. The corruption network wasn't just a few bad actors. It was an ecosystem. Stuart Daniel's property development company had systematically bought land through intimidation and fraud, often working with Corey Daniel to have properties condemned or rezoned. Whitney, or as county prosecutor, had buried investigations. Sidney Cohen had arrested or harassed anyone who complained. The storage unit Glenn had referenced was in a rundown facility on the edge of town. Joel waited until midnight to visit, Emma sleeping at Mrs. Chin's under the guise of a late job interview. Inside Unit 247, Joel found 4 filing cabinets and a wall covered in Glenn's meticulous notes, a conspiracy map connecting dozens of smaller players to the core 4. But what made Joel's blood run cold was the newest addition, a file labeled Riverside Gardens. He opened it and saw his own apartment complex. According to the documents, Stuart Daniel had been systematically buying up properties in Joel's neighborhood for the past 18 months, planning to demolish them for luxury condos. But several buildings, including Joel's, had tenants with long-term leases. The solution, according to an email exchange Joel was reading, was to make living conditions untenable until residents broke their leases. The burst pipe last month that flooded 3 apartments. The broken furnace in December that took 2 weeks to repair. The electrical fires that kept happening. None of it was accidental. Joel photographed everything, his hands shaking with rage. These people were poisoning his daughter's home for profit. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "We know you have Glenn's files. Walk away now and keep the life you have." Joel's jaw tightened. They were already watching him. He spent the next day analyzing Glenn's strategy notes. The old judge had tried the legal route, gathering evidence for federal prosecutors, for the state attorney general. Each time, the investigations had stalled or disappeared. The corruption ran too deep, had too many failings. But Glenn's final notes suggested a different approach. Make them destroy themselves. Give them rope. Joel began to understand. These people had gotten away with their crimes because they operated in shadows, protected by their positions. But they were also arrogant, comfortable in their power. Glenn had documented patterns. How Stuart Daniel celebrated victories with extravagant parties. How Corey Daniel couldn't resist boasting to other council members. How Whitney kept trophies of the cases she'd buried. They were predictable, and predictable meant exploitable. Joel started with the smallest player he could identify. Frankie Stein, a building inspector who'd signed off on dozens of fraudulent safety reports for Stuart Daniel. According to Glenn's notes, Frankie had a gambling problem and a mistress his wife didn't know about. Joel waited outside the inspector's office, then followed him to a bar where he met a woman who was definitely not Mrs. Stein. Joel took photos, then approached the table. "Frankie Stein? I'm Joel Bowman. I think we should talk about the reports you filed on Riverside Gardens." Frankie's face went white. "I don't know what." Joel placed a photo on the table, one of Glenn's, showing Frankie accepting an envelope from Stuart Daniel. "I have 2 years of documentation. I also have these photos from tonight. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about how Stuart's operation works. In exchange, your wife never sees these, and when this goes public, I'll make sure prosecutors know you cooperated." "They'll kill me," Frankie whispered. "They'll destroy you legally if you don't. Pick your poison." Over 2 hours, Frankie spilled everything. Names of other inspectors on the take, the system of bribes, the properties that had been condemned on fraudulent grounds. Joel recorded it all on a device Naomi Post had provided, one that Glenn had arranged. "Why are you doing this?" Frankie asked finally. "You're nobody. They'll crush you." Joel thought of Emma asking if it was her fault he'd lost his job. Because somebody has to. But Joel's victory was short-lived. The next morning, he received a visit from 2 detectives, not Sidney Cohen himself, but officers clearly working for him. "Joel Bowman, we need you to come with us. Questions about a theft reported at a storage facility." They'd found out about the unit. At the station, Joel was put in an interrogation room where Sidney Cohen eventually appeared, a barrel-chested man with cold eyes and a politician's smile. "Mr. Bowman, you're in possession of materials that were reported stolen from Glenn Hooper's estate. I was given those materials by his attorney. The Hooper family is contesting that will. Says the old man was senile, that you probably manipulated him during that roadside encounter." Sidney leaned forward. "Here's how this works. You turn over everything, files, recordings, copies, and we forget this happened. You get a little money for your trouble and go back to your life. Or we charge you with theft, fraud, and harassment. You lose your daughter while you're in prison fighting charges that'll bankrupt you." Joel felt ice in his veins. "You'd threaten a child? I'm offering you a way out. These people you're messing with, they own this city. You're a guy who changes tires in the rain. Know your place." But Sidney had made a mistake. The interrogation room had cameras, and the audio recording devices Glenn had provided were sophisticated enough to pick up the entire conversation. More importantly, Sidney's arrogance had revealed something crucial. They were scared. If Joel was really no threat, they wouldn't be trying this hard. Joel was released after Naomi Post arrived with a lawyer, someone Glenn had apparently arranged for as well, a young attorney named Peter Park who specialized in civil rights cases. "Don't go home," Peter advised as they left the station. "They know where you live, and they've just shown they're willing to play dirty." Joel's heart sank. "My daughter. Already handled. Ms. Post moved her and Mrs. Chun to a safe location an hour ago. Glenn anticipated this. They drove to a small house on the outskirts of the city where Emma was coloring at a kitchen table, Mrs. Chun watching her carefully. Emma's face lit up when she saw Joel, but he could see the confusion and fear in her eyes. "Daddy, why did we have to leave?" Joel knelt beside her, smoothing her hair. "Remember how I said helping people is never wrong? Well, I'm helping a lot of people right now, and some bad people don't like that. But we're going to be okay. I promise. Like superheroes." Joel managed to smile. Something like that. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Joel sat with Peter Park and reviewed what they had. Frankenstein's testimony was good, but not enough. He was too small a player. They needed something that would bring media attention, that would make the corruption impossible to ignore or bury. Joel thought about Stuart Daniels' patterns. Glenn's notes indicated the developer always celebrated big deals with a party at his estate, inviting the whole network, council members, prosecutors, police brass, inspectors. A chance to show off his power. "When's his next party?" Joel asked. Peter checked Glenn's calendar notes. "Week after next. He just secured the final property in the Riverside Gardens acquisition. Your building, actually. Your landlord sold yesterday." Joel's fists clenched. "His home. Emma's home. Glenn has a contact list," Joel said slowly, "including servers and catering staff who've worked these parties. And he noted that Stuart always insists on the same company." Peter caught on. "You want to get inside. I want to record everything. Get them talking, celebrating, admitting what they've done. Then we leak it everywhere. Media, federal authorities, social media. Make it too big to bury. That's incredibly dangerous." "I know." Joel looked toward the room where Emma slept. "But if I don't do this, we lose everything anyway. At least this way, we're fighting back." Over the next week, Joel transformed himself. With Peter's help, he reached out to one of Glenn's contacts, Rose Donovan, a caterer who'd worked Stuart's parties for years and had grown disgusted with what she'd overheard. "I'll get you in," Rose said when they met. "But you understand what happens if they catch you." "I understand." The day of the party, Joel barely recognized himself in the server's uniform, his beard trimmed, his hair styled differently. Rose provided him with hidden recording devices, another gift from Glenn's meticulous planning, sewn into his jacket. Stuart Daniels' estate was obscene, a sprawling mansion overlooking the river, built on land that Glenn's notes indicated had been acquired through fraud. Joel served drinks and appetizers alongside Rose and 3 other servers, keeping his head down, his ears open. The guests were exactly who Glenn had documented: Corey Daniel, holding court about his latest city council victory; Whitney, or laughing about a case she'd just dismissed; Sidney Cohen, drinking heavily and boasting about handling that Bowman situation. But the moment Joel had been waiting for came when Stuart gathered the core group in his study, a meeting Rose had told him about, where the real business happened. Joel volunteered to bring in fresh drinks. Inside the wood-paneled room, he set down the tray and prepared to leave, but Corey's voice stopped him. "Make sure we're not disturbed," the councilman said dismissively. Joel nodded, stepping out, but leaving the door slightly ajar, and a recording device on the drink cart he'd positioned inside. For 43 minutes, he listened through his earpiece as Stuart Daniel and his circle discussed their empire. They named names, amounts, properties. They laughed about obstacles they'd removed, and Joel's blood froze when he heard Corey mention, "That judge who got too curious." "You mean Hooper?" Whitney said. "Natural causes officially. Amazing what stress can do to a weak heart." They'd killed Glenn. Maybe not directly, but they'd known about his condition, had deliberately pressured him, stressed him, hoping for exactly what happened. "And this Bowman idiot?" Stuart asked. Sidney chuckled. "Taken care of. I've got evidence being planted in his place right now. Drug paraphernalia, stolen property. Tomorrow we raid him, take the kid into protective services. He'll be so busy fighting to get her back, he won't have time for anything else." Joel's vision went red. They were going to frame him, take Emma. He forced himself to stay calm, to keep recording. This was it. This was everything Glenn had needed. Admission of murder, conspiracy, child endangerment. But then the study door opened, and Frankenstein walked in. Joel's heart stopped. The inspector saw him immediately, their eyes meeting across the hallway. For a moment, neither moved. Then Frankie looked away, walking past into the study. Joel heard, "Stuart, We have a problem. That server. Joel ran. He made it to the kitchen before shouts erupted behind him. Rose looked up, saw his face, and immediately understood. Back exit, through the garden, she hissed, pressing car keys into his hand. Silver Honda, space 47. Go. Joel crashed through the back door as he heard Sidney Cohen's voice bellowing orders. He sprinted across the manicured lawn, vaulted a fence, and found himself in the parking area. Space 47, there? Behind him, men were emerging from the mansion. Joel got the Honda started and floored it, tires squealing as bullets sparked off the car's frame. Joel drove blindly for 20 minutes before his training from construction work kicked in. He couldn't just run, couldn't lead them to Emma. He ditched Rose's car in a mall parking lot, wiped it down, and called Peter Park from a burner phone Glenn had provided for emergencies. They're coming for me. For Emma. We need to move now, tonight. I'm already working on it, Peter said, his voice tight. The recording? I got everything. Murder confession, conspiracy, plans to frame me. But Frankie burned me. They know who I am. Then we go nuclear. Get to the safe house. I'm uploading everything to every media outlet and federal agency simultaneously. We make this so public they can't bury it. Joel made his way to the safe house through a maze of back roads, constantly checking for tails. When he finally arrived, Emma was awake, frightened by the tension in the adults around her. Daddy, what's happening? Joel pulled her close. Remember I told you I was helping people? Well, I just helped a lot of them. But the bad people are very angry, and we need to be brave for a little while longer. Peter arrived an hour later with his laptop, Naomi Post behind him. It's uploading now. Every recording, every document, everything Glenn compiled. I've sent it to the FBI, the state attorney general, every major news network, and about 50 journalists Glenn had flagged as trustworthy. How long until? Naomi's phone buzzed. Then Peter's. Then both started ringing constantly. It's already hitting, Naomi said, reading her screen with wide eyes. Channel 7 just ran a breaking news alert. CNN is picking it up. The hashtag is trending. Joel watched as his phone, the regular one, not the burner, exploded with notifications. The story was everywhere. Massive corruption ring exposed in mid-sized city. Judge's deathbed evidence reveals decades of fraud. Audio recording implicates prosecutor, police captain, developer, councilman. By dawn, federal agents were raiding Stuart Daniels' estate. By noon, all 4 of the main conspirators were in custody. The evidence was too overwhelming, too public to suppress. But Joel's fight wasn't over. 3 days later, he sat in a federal courtroom as Sidney Cohen's lawyer tried to have the recordings thrown out as illegally obtained. But Peter Park had done his homework. Glenn had done his homework. Every recording had been made with consent from at least one party, Rose, who owned the catering company and had access to the estate, or in places where there was no expectation of privacy. More importantly, once the initial arrests hit the news, witnesses started coming forward. People Stewart had defrauded. Families Sidney had threatened. Council members Corey had extorted. The corruption had touched hundreds of lives, and now they all wanted justice. Joel testified about Glenn's final wishes, about the encounter in the rain, about what he'd found in the storage unit. The prosecutor, a state-level official brought in specifically because the local office was compromised, used Joel's testimony to paint a picture of systematic abuse of power. But the defense tried to paint Joel as an opportunist, someone who'd manipulated a dying old man and fabricated evidence for money. Isn't it convenient, Stuart Daniels' attorney sneered, that you, a desperate man drowning in debt, just happened to help a wealthy judge who just happened to make you his heir? Joel met the lawyer's eyes steadily. I helped an old man in the rain because it was the right thing to do. I didn't know who he was. I didn't expect anything. That's the whole point. Glenn Hooper wanted someone who'd do the right thing without expecting a reward. He found that person. And the $500,000 trust? That's not a reward. That's compensation for turning my life upside down to finish what he started. For putting my daughter at risk to expose people who've been poisoning this city for decades. Joel leaned forward. You want to talk about money? Let's talk about how your client made $70 million through fraud and intimidation. Let's talk about the families he destroyed, the homes he stole, the lives he ruined. $500,000 to make that right seems like a bargain. The courtroom was silent. In the end, the evidence spoke for itself. The recordings, the documents, the testimony of dozens of victims and participants who'd flipped for immunity. The trial took 6 weeks, but the verdict was never in doubt. Stuart Daniel, guilty on 47 counts, including racketeering, fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder. 30 years. Corey Daniel, guilty on 32 counts. 25 years. Whitney, or guilty on 28 counts, including obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. 20 years. Sidney Cohen, guilty on 39 counts, including conspiracy to commit murder, abuse of power, and intimidation. 28 years. Joel watched from the gallery as they were led away in handcuffs, Stuart's face purple with rage, Sidney's cold mask finally cracking into fear. They'd been untouchable gods of their small domain, and now they were just criminals facing justice. But for Joel, the moment that mattered most came 2 weeks after the verdict. The trust Glenn had established was released. $500,000, minus legal fees and taxes, left Joel with $412,000. Enough to pay off Sarah's medical debt. Enough for a down payment on a real house with a yard where Emma could play. Enough for her college fund. Enough to breathe. Joel stood in front of Glenn Hooper's grave with Emma beside him, holding a bouquet of flowers she'd picked herself. "Was he a good man, Daddy?" Emma asked. "The best kind," Joel said. "He spent his whole life trying to help people, and when he couldn't do it anymore himself, he found someone who could. Like you." Joel knelt beside his daughter. "Like us. You know why I stopped to help him that night? Because you taught me to. Every time you share your toys even when you don't want to, every time you help Mrs. Chun even when you're tired, you remind me what matters." Glenn saw that. He saw you in me. Emma placed the flowers on the grave. "I miss Mommy, but I think she'd be proud of you." Joel's eyes burned. "I think so too." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Emma tugged his hand. "Can we go home now? Our real home." Their new house was modest, but theirs, a 3-bedroom with a small yard in a neighborhood where kids played in the streets and neighbors knew each other's names. Joel had used some of the money to start a small contracting business, specializing in honest renovation work. Word had spread about what he'd done, and there was no shortage of people who wanted to hire the man who'd stood up to corruption. Peter Park had become a friend, often stopping by for dinner with updates on the continuing investigations. Glenn's evidence had opened up cases in 3 other cities, revealing a network even larger than they'd initially thought. Naomi Post had helped Joel establish a foundation in Glenn's name, supporting families struggling with medical debt. It felt right, a way to honor both Glenn and Sarah. But the moment Joel cherished most came 3 months after the verdict. He and Emma were in their new backyard, planting a garden, when Emma suddenly stopped digging. "Daddy, do you think we'll ever help someone like Glenn helped us?" Joel looked at his daughter, dirt smudged on her cheek, her eyes bright with hope and possibility. He thought about how close they'd come to losing everything, how one act of kindness had changed their entire lives. "I think we already do, sweetheart. Every single day. That's what Glenn taught me. Kindness isn't about grand gestures. It's about seeing someone who needs help and choosing to stop, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something." "Like changing a tire in the rain?" "Exactly like that." Emma grinned and went back to digging. Joel watched her, this beautiful, brave little girl who'd survived so much loss and fear, and he understood what Glenn had really given him. It wasn't the money, though that had saved them. It wasn't even the justice, though that had been necessary. It was the reminder that in a world that often felt designed to grind down good people, choosing kindness was an act of rebellion. That helping someone, expecting nothing in return, could create ripples that changed everything. Joel's phone buzzed, a text from Rose Donovan, who testified against Stewart and was now expanding her catering business with Joel's help. "Just booked the mayor's holiday party. Guess the new administration likes honest vendors. Thanks for everything." Joel smiled. The old network of corruption was being replaced, slowly, by people who'd been waiting for their chance to do things right. Glenn had known that exposing the darkness would let in light. As the sun set over their new backyard, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Emma started singing, some song from school about planting seeds and watching them grow. Joel joined in, his voice rough but happy. He thought about Glenn Hooper's last words to him. "I won't forget this, Joel Bowman." But it was Joel who would never forget. The old man who'd seen something worth saving in a tired construction worker who stopped to change a tire in the rain, who'd trusted him with a mission that had seemed impossible. who'd given him not just money, but purpose. That night, as Joel tucked Emma into bed in their new home, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, if you saw someone who needed help tomorrow, would you stop?" Joel thought about it honestly, about the risks, the costs, the way kindness had upended his entire life. "Yes," he said finally. "Every time. Because that's who we are." Emma smiled and closed her eyes, safe and loved in a home they truly owned, in a life they'd fought for and earned. Joel stood in the doorway watching her breathe, this small perfect person who was his whole world. He'd been a single dad working 2 jobs, drowning in debt, barely surviving. Now he was a business owner, a homeowner, a man who'd brought down an empire of corruption. But more than any of that, he was someone who'd stayed true to what his father had taught him, what Glenn had seen in him, what he was teaching Emma: never regret kindness. Outside, the rain started falling again, pattering against the windows of their warm, safe home. Joel listened to it and smiled, remembering another rainy night, another choice, another moment when he decided that doing the right thing mattered more than convenience. He'd do it again, 1,000 times over. And somewhere, he liked to think Glenn Hooper knew that and was proud. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.